everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Motivate with Coach Camp. I am down here in this very purpley blue studio of SRP with Mr. Derek Michaud. Hey, I know you guys have been following closely, and we've had some amazing guests recently. Mr. Casey Smith, that was just on this past week. Before that, of course, we had Miss Carolyn O'Byrne. Some amazing stories across the board. One of the things that I love about podcasting, and one of the things that I have truly come to appreciate about doing this and having this platform, is that I'm not just connecting with people in the area, which I love that. I love my locals. But man, it really gives you an opportunity to meet people all over. So Miss O'Byrne was down in Alabama. Casey, as you guys know, drove down from Indiana. Well, this week's guest, she's special. She's special to me in a lot of ways. We got to become friends at the Blocks, which some of my viewers, if y'all have been following religiously, like I know millions of you do, we became friends there. And we were both different types of entrepreneurs, obviously a motivational speaker. She has her business. We'll talk about that in a minute. But she had some amazing background stories, and we just kind of clicked that way. And I was like, wow, you should consider coming on the show. And so she is zooming in all the way from Las Vegas, Nevada, by way of New Hampshire. And we're going to talk about all these things. Her name is Miss Marika Therrien, and she is a flower preservation artist. I hope I said all those things right. My Mississippi gets on my lips sometimes, but she is an amazing story. I know you guys are going to absolutely love her. So at this time, please welcome in with me, Miss Marika. How are you doing, lady?
Oh my gosh, my cheeks hurt from laughing so much already. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I am so excited to have you on here. So obviously we met at the Blocks. Was that a wild ride or what?
Honestly, it was probably one of the top 5 best experiences of my life for a multitude of reasons.
It's crazy how you just cannot start to even really wrap your head around what that was going to be before you got there. And then it's taken me some time after that to wrap my head around what it was I just experienced, because it really was less about the show and it was a whole lot more about the people. Would you agree?
I would say the people and the personal development were the top 2 big ones for me, making the connections between people to better yourself and your business, but also like getting over some of your major fears while being there. Like I had never public spoken before on a stage in front of hundreds of people, and I had to get up the first day and do that.
You did do
And
that.
I think I crushed it. You know what I mean? Like that was a huge fear of mine that I was excited to get over, but I feel like personal development was like my number one.
Oh, you crushed it. In fact, so much so that it got everybody's attention. Because one of the things I love, if you don't mind me sharing, so how the competition worked was we were separated out into our pods, and then you compete against, anywhere from 8 to 10 people within your pod. And then your judge would pick somebody for that day. And then you would go up against the last 8 or 9 folks on the stage that night in front of everybody on the big stage. By the way, spoiler alert, you're not going to see Coach Camp up there. Nevertheless, I had my moments and it was fine. But Miss Marika gets up there on the first night, and you're allowed to take your book of notes. And of course, people feel very comfortable with that. It gives you a little bit of security. It's almost like you got cheat sheets about what they're going to bring to you. And my girl, which just said she's never done public speaking, takes that book and she just like, let's go. Mic drop, except it was a book. And I'm like, yes, let's do this. So obviously, even though you're saying you did not have the confidence, you were putting it out there that you had the confidence. And I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was borderline peeing my pants the entire time before walking on that stage. Like the amount of energy that was flowing through my body before getting up there was immense. But I knew before getting on that stage that I had already won the day. And I knew before even winning the day that I was going to drop the book on the floor and I was going to make a statement, bring the drama, if you will. It's TV, gotta bring a little drama.
That's right.
But I had this whole thing planned in my head. Like I had been dreaming about that moment for weeks prior to even getting to the TV show. And for me, it was kind of a kismet moment that I had played this out so many times in my head that I was just it was bound to happen anyways. And for that reason, I felt very prepared getting up there. But I've been talking about this week actually, and how when you get prepared to go upstage and do something like that, and you have all of this energy in your body, which you can interpret as anxiety or fear for going on stage, something that really translated for me in the personal development part of being on this TV show was taking that anxiety and turning it into excitement and realizing that those two feelings are the same feeling in your body. It's just how you interpret them. So I went on that stage knowing I was so excited to be there and so excited to like finally make an impact with what I've been doing to influence the art community, you know?
I think that's beautifully said. And really, what you brought to light was just how we have perspective to life. So
Mhm.
often, so many of our fears that we end up facing were self imposed. And you create this moment that's way bigger than it actually is. And then a lot of times, when you go ahead and you go through whatever that thing is, you come out the other side, you're like, oh, that wasn't near as bad as I thought it was. And
Mhm.
I'm around people that they express that to me all the time in the EMS world, even. So I think that's profound. And that's a great growth moment. So that is a great thing that
Mhm.
you just shared that with us. So to let my audience members know, one of the things I like to do is I like to build that foundation of my guest for the week. So let's start with tell me a little bit about growing up, what it was like to be Marika as a little girl.
I was definitely like the quiet kid coloring in the corner, like always doing arts and crafts. I was the kid that made gifts for everybody. I always had like that one best friend, but pretty much kept to myself most of the time. I was extremely athletic, competitive gymnast for 11 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then I switched to volleyball in high school and played varsity volleyball all 4 years up until getting recruited to Division 3 volleyball, which ultimately I turned down because I wanted to go to a big D1 school and kind of went a different direction from sports from there on, but extremely athletic, extremely like driven for competition. I mean, I have hundreds of medals from gymnastics. You know, I had
What
dreams
was
of
your
going to the
specialty?
Olympics when I was younger.
What was your specialty of in gymnastics?
We had to do everything, but I was best at probably floor or vault up until the point where it started to get really hard.
I got news for you. If you see me flipping, look around because somebody has hit me with a car. So I mean, I have incredible admiration that you were able to do that stuff. And gymnastics, man, that's some rigorous workouts. It's constant.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Absolutely.
feel like I'm 90-year-old now. You know, my body has taken a beating from gymnastics, but it taught me a lot of lessons growing up.
Hmm.
It taught me like how to like really pursue something that you're scared of and like working through the fear of things. So a lot of like great life lessons come out of doing gymnastics.
Yeah. So what about brothers, sisters? Do you have any of those?
Only child.
Only child. You know what?
Yeah.
I say this with so this is a kind comment. This is an actual real compliment. You did not come across as an only child. You know,
Oh,
usually
thank
they're pretty selfish, right? I know because I have a daughter that she has two older brothers, but she has essentially been an only child for so many years because her next closest sibling is 12 years older. And so
Yeah.
she's had the whole world given to her. And sometimes she a little spoiled, but you never came across that way. So that's impressive. You must have had some great structure in your life then to keep humble and stay focused and
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily structure as much as like I grew up very independent. You know, I grew up with a single mom that worked 3 jobs just to try and get us to have food on the table. And I think that my humbleness comes from, you know, beginnings that I was really like we had the bare minimum. And so even though I was an only child, like I was never spoiled in any way.
yeah.
So I think that like you know, there's traits about me that are only child syndrome for sure. Like, don't share snacks with me. Don't like to share my food.
I got
But
you.
for the most part, yeah, very humble beginnings for sure.
Yeah. So, and tell everybody because I think I hinted on it, but I really didn't go there. Where did you grow up?
Well, technically, I was born in Colorado, and raised in New Hampshire. So when I was about 2.5 years old, moved back to New Hampshire. That's where all my family is, and that's where I spent most of my life growing up.
Yeah. So I remember whenever we met for the first time, really started talking at the blocks, you said something about, I can't even remember what the conversation was, but what struck me that was so funny was you said something about, yeah, a basic white girl from New Hampshire. And I'm like, that is some funny one-liners. That's you were very unassuming because you know you were dressed nicely and you had all this stuff, and now I'm looking like a gym coach. And you just said this thing. I was like, that is hilarious. So then immediately I know, well, she's got a sense of humor. She's my people. So that's good stuff. Uh how
I think
old
somebody made a joke about like a rap song or something, and I was like, I'm not picking up on that.
That's what it was. See, I'm glad you remember the rest of the story. Once you get to my age, things are vague, but those moments they stay in there. And then you're like, I don't know where I got this from, but I heard this moment.
Yeah.
So up there
Yeah.
in New Hampshire, how old were you? Or like, I know you moved from there at some point. How long did you live in New Hampshire?
I was there until I was 21. So I graduated college at University of New Hampshire with a pre-med degree,
Wow.
medical microbiology to be exact. And I was like, all right, well, what the heck am I going to do with this degree now? I have to get more school to do anything with it. So I moved to Boston,
Hmm.
and that's like an hour from where I grew up. So not too far from home, but I did a year of grad school for radiation therapy in Boston, realized I absolutely hated my life and wanted nothing to do with the medical industry.
Wow.
And so I popped into hospitality. I was just waitressing to keep up anyways. And so started managing the restaurant that I was working at, and kind of came to the conclusion that the East Coast wasn't really the vibe for me. So in 2018, I said, what better place to be a pretty girl in hospitality than Las Vegas? And I picked up and moved across the country and said, all right, we're just going to try something new. And it's been 6 years now.
All right, so we got to unpack a few things. I mean, I knew some stuff about you, but I don't like to know everything. I could have asked more, but I'm like, you know what? I want those surprises. So
Yeah.
this is interesting. So I had no idea that you were in the medical or like going down the medical road. What were
Yeah.
you thinking you wanted to become initially then?
Yeah, I mean, because I was a gymnast growing up, I inevitably had a lot of injuries. So I spent a lot of time at the doctors, like getting fixed for various
Yeah.
things. And so I had it in my head. I was like, okay, well, I love sports. I love the idea of like helping people. How can I combine those two things? So my first major was actually athletic training.
Hmm.
And part of me was just like, I don't think I'm going to ever make the amount of money that I want to in this job. So I was like, I'm going to switch to just like a broad major while I'm trying to figure out who I want to be. I got to the end of my 4 years of college, still didn't know what I wanted to be really. Um, and,
It speaks
like,
volumes to
that's,
people, though, right? But you were taking steps, and I bet
oh, totally.
you those moments gave you a whole lot of tools to work with in life.
Yeah. I mean, a mass amount of education, it's funny. I had this conversation this week as well. I've actually never read a textbook for school. So I had like a 3.3 something around 3.3 from my GPA. Never read a textbook my entire college career and high school career. And I just learned in different ways, which is really silly. But yeah, I was able to just get through it. Even though I was smart about learning it, I was never like passionate about it. I was just going through the motions because I was trying to get a prestigious job like the world tells you to do. And, come to find out, I had to go down a pretty gnarly path to figure out who I really was and who I wanted to be. And, the journey is the important part. And looking back on it now, I'm happy that I did all of those things. But man, it took a heck of a lot of time to figure out who I wanted to be and what my purpose is in life.
So one of the things right there that you just touched on, which is really important, because Motivate with Coach Camp is all about motivation. And one of the things I like to try to do with my guests is find those moments of inspiration. And what you realize is a lot of times people go into something or they start down a road. They don't really know if that's what they want, but they don't miss the prize because what you just said is so true. The prize is within the journey. And it doesn't matter what that journey is, good, bad, and different. If you're paying attention and you're learning lessons, you're going to find stuff that you can apply to any other phase of your life. And so, even though that turned out to be not your thing with the medicine and that, I got to give you a lot of kudos here before we move to this next part of it, which is so critical, is that you didn't, even though you started out feeling like you had to be this type of person, right? I just had a guest on not long ago, and she talked about how she was so successful all the way up through her master's degree. And she realizes none of that was her. That's not who she was supposed to be. That's what other people wanted her to be. And it actually created this whole traumatic mindset of she was not healthy, essentially.
Mhm.
And so what you're saying is, though, you recognize this at a point, but I want people to get from that this. It doesn't matter if you think you've made bad choices. Realize that you can change your course, but don't feel like that you wasted that time because you're going to find stuff in there that you don't even see right now. You don't even realize is going to be valuable down the road. And I know that you're going to have some of that that's going to blend into the rest of your story here. So here you are, you get through all your biology stuff. You're about to do some other things. You're like, you know what? Nope, nope. I want to be showcasing, and Las Vegas, Nevada's calling my name. How ballsy is it to pack your stuff and just move to a place you didn't have any friends, family, nothing? Am I correct on that?
No, I did have some friends
You
here.
had some
And
friends.
so
Okay.
One of my really good friends from college, who's actually now one of my financial advisors, he got me to move to Vegas. I came out here to visit for a friend's birthday, and he picked us up from the airport. And the first thing he said to me, he looked me right in the eye and he said, Marika, this town was made for you.
Mm,
And that entire trip, we had a blast, don't get me wrong, but it was like party city, you know what I mean? Like
sure.
nightclub, day club, nightclub, just back and forth. And we actually canceled our flight home and flew home earlier because we just gave up. We're like, I can't do it anymore. But there was something about this city that was just like the energy of the city out here.
Mhm.
It was really calling my name. And I had a lot of influences in my life that like the city of Las Vegas kept popping up into my life somehow. And I knew I wanted to be west. I just didn't know quite where, but the cost of living in Vegas is amazing. So I was like, you know what? It's a good starting place. I can always move somewhere else if I want to. And I do know a couple people. So let's just go try it out. And let me tell you, it was not an easy move. The first 2.5 years of living here were the hardest years of my life.
How so? Was it just the adjustment?
A bit of the adjustment of being on my own and trying to find a good job out here. I didn't realize how hard it would be to find a good job in Vegas, not knowing many people. It's all about who you know out here. So the first couple of months were really just like establishing connections to try and get a decent job. And one of my first jobs was at Wolfgang Puck at MGM. I was waitressing there, and I was bitching to my trainer at the gym about how I hated the current job that I had. And the other person he was training was like, "Oh, you need a job? I manage a restaurant." Like, so, and that's how it happens here. You know, you have to know somebody. And yeah, so I kind of just got into like the hotel scene that way and did a bunch of like cocktailing at pools out here, you know, like the industry stuff of Vegas, but very quickly got burnt out of that and found myself in sales, which is a lot of where like my business skill comes from, was these high ticket sales jobs.
Yeah. So when you're moving from New Hampshire, and I can only imagine this, I've never lived in New Hampshire. I've been to New Hampshire and I've been to Las Vegas. That had to be a culture shock as well. So you talk about the adjustment side of it. What did you see was the biggest adjustment side besides the difficulty in finding a job, obviously?
This is a very transient town.
Mhm.
So, you know, I come from a very small hometown. People, they're born there, they're raised there, they have their kids there, you know, they don't
Right.
leave that town. Vegas is everybody's from somewhere else,
Mm.
and most of the time they're in a transition phase of life. So I think that's like the biggest difference is nobody's here to stay. They're just here to kind of do their thing, have some fun and figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
I very much was in a figure it out phase of life, so it kind of worked.
So what stays in Vegas or what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? Is that the saying? Is that
Sometimes.
something like that? Sometimes, but then sometimes you just stayed in Vegas is where I was going with that bad joke that I stumbled over. Yes,
Yeah.
the saying
Yeah.
of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, sometimes when you go to Vegas, you stay in
You,
Vegas.
you stay in
Yeah.
Vegas. Yeah.
I'd say without knowing that, the difference of lifestyles, I had a feeling though, upper New England, probably
Mhm.
slower pace of life than it would be obviously in Las Vegas. A lot
Yeah.
more diversity, a lot more distractions, you could even say, in the big
Totally.
city life for sure. So that was I could see where all those things would be a big adjustment to a young person.
Yeah.
And you went out there on a whim,
Mhm.
basically to just see what life would bring to you. And now you say you've been there for 6 years.
Yeah.
So getting out there, all right. So
So life has happened.
you're establishing yourself, you're getting set up, and at that point in time, now we're going to talk about your business on the back end of this thing because that's the amazing side of where you've come from, and
Mhm.
I'd like to know how all of these moments kind of blended into doing that thing, which I have a feeling you'll be able to explain great.
Mhm.
So at this point in time, 6 years later, has it developed or has it evolved in the way that you could have ever seen, or has it just been a completely like different path that there's no way you could have ever foreseen?
I never in a million years foresaw myself sitting in this position, running the business that I'm doing now, being a full-time artist. Just the like pride that I feel to be able to say that I'm a full-time artist.
Mhm.
I like was so lost for so much of my life trying to figure out who I was as a person. Am I this salesperson that sells timeshare and solar? Am I this, you know, cocktail waitress? Am I this, you know, trying to model, trying to figure it out here in Vegas? You know, there's all these things that I was good at and I made my way, but none of them like felt authentic to me. And although I was good at them, I didn't love doing them. And yeah, I never in a million years thought I would call myself a full-time artist for
Yeah,
sure.
so I think that's part of it too. Is that's I was curious if you think that if you'd have stayed in New Hampshire, you would have found this part of you.
It's really funny
Hard to
because
say, right? Hard to know.
no, it's so true though, because exactly like you asked me, what was I like as a kid? I was an artsy kid. I was always coloring, drawing, doing some weird thing, like just making up my own way and my imagination. And I think I forgot about that for a really long time because I was trying to be the person everybody wanted me to be, following, what society tells us and what school tells us and all of these things. And I actually took a jewelry class in high school and
Mm,
I was so good at it. And I I wish looking back, somebody looked at me and said, you can make this a business. You can do this for the rest of your life if you want to. But at the time, it was like you go to school for something that's
yeah.
prestigious, law or medicine or business, you choose something that feels authentic to you. And I was like, okay, well, I like to learn about science, so I guess I'll go to school for that. And yeah, I wish somebody had sat me down and said, you're really good at this. You should pursue this.
It's funny because your style, your if you don't mind me saying, your style, your personality kind of strikes me as like that wild card, which is exactly what I relate to. I've never looked at a box. I don't know. The people talk about thinking inside the box. I don't think outside the box because I don't even know what the box is.
Yeah.
I've always been kind of like spontaneous in a way and kind of gone with the moment that I feel like was most important to me. Just one small example, like I decided in my senior year of high school that and there's reasons, bigger reasons, but I took a second year of high school. So most kids don't think that way. But then more importantly, most parents don't go along with it. I come home, I told my mom and dad, I'm like, look, I'm going to stay back and have a second senior year. And they're just like, okay, whatever. It's like,
Mhm.
what are they going to do with me? Right. And then my buddy Derek, that is my producer, same thing, Maine, and just up and leaves and comes to Nashville. So I think I
Mhm.
do surround you gravitate toward people that are a little bit more eccentric in mind and just take chances. It just took a minute for you to get to that point, right?
Yeah, I very much was like following the path of least resistance, if you will, like the roadmap that they set out for you. And although here's the thing, I was always good at those things.
Mhm.
So to me, I was like, okay, I'm on the path. I'm good at it. I'm doing a good job, but everything else in my life was chaos.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why everything I did attracted chaos. And it wasn't until COVID happened, lost everything, jobs gone, lifestyle gone, that I had time to sit down and be like, who am I? What do I like to do? And that's when my business started, is when I was just purely doing something for fun. And the week prior to COVID shutting everything down, I was sitting in the office at my timeshare job. It's one of the most toxic jobs I've ever worked in my life.
I can't imagine.
And I was sitting there, and my friend had just gifted me all of this resin and all of these supplies. She came to my house. We did a little crafting together, and she was like, oh, you seem to really like this. Do you want me to leave all of my stuff here? And that's how I started the craft, was somebody gifting everything to me. And a week later, everything shuts down. I have all of these resin supplies. I have all these beautiful flowers around my house that I can go pick and, turn into cool things. And here we are. These earrings that I'm wearing today, they're locally picked. They're one of my first pairs I ever made for myself, and just to be able to like fall in love with the craft, which when you relate it back to me growing up, when I was a kid, my mom used to pick and press flowers when we went on vacation, and she would bring this flower identification book with us, and she'd show me, okay, this is this flower. She'd press it in the book. She would take it home and laminate it into a bookmark, and that was like a side gig for her, just like a fun side gig to make extra money. And so I had seen this stuff growing up. I had always been that kid that was out in the field picking flowers, picking up shells, hunting for crystals. Like I was just that kid digging through the dirt, and I think it's funny that when you circle back and you embrace those things from your childhood, that it really, you start to fall into like your life path when you start
You
to
see
connect
where
them.
the seeds were planted. You could see
Yeah.
where the seeds literally were planted with that.
Yeah.
What pun intended, but ultimately that kind of stuck with you. That was a childhood memory that ultimately cultivated itself into what you do now. And I want to
Yeah.
dive into that deep at the end of this because I want everybody to know about how to reach you, how to find you, where to get your stuff, because all of that is the big picture of who Marika has become, obviously. Um,
Yep.
what we're going to do, when did you say you moved out there to Las Vegas? What year?
2018.
So you moved out there in 2018.
Yep.
That's an important fact because what I want to do, and here's the thing for my listeners, you can have so many different areas of your life that impact who you become. And we just talked a lot about how Marika was developed as a child and independent, and then went down a path and then changed her course and all these things. And all of that is relevant to who you are today and how you're going to be successful in the future. And that matters a lot. But there are times in our lives, no one usually is excluded from this. It's just different versions of whatever that is that have a profound impact on a person's life. And you shared this with me on the blocks. And so then I was obviously intrigued, and I'm like, look, that's something that I know everybody across the world is aware happens, but not everybody, thankfully, has to experience. And what I'm talking about is you were a part of, unfortunately, one of the worst mass shootings ever, and what also happens to be the worst in modern day history in America at Las Vegas. And we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about what that moment was like for you, what the trauma's been like, and how you've gotten past that and where we are today. Because I think that is something that there are obviously concerns everybody has in the world, that any time you could fall victim to this. So I'm going to ask my viewers, please take a minute, get yourself ready, come right back. We're going to be back after just a few seconds after this.
A great opportunity awaits. The Motivate with Coach Camp podcast is now in its second season, and we are excited to say that we have listeners all over the United States and in 19 countries. If you have a company and you're interested in some very affordable advertising, while at the same time supporting a great cause, please go to motivatewithcoachcamp.com and fill out that sponsorship page, and we'll get right back to you. You can support the podcast through donations on Venmo at Motivate with Coach Camp. Thank you to all the listeners and guests who have blessed this podcast with their engagement and involvement.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for that little break. And I'm here with Miss Marika out there in Las Vegas, Nevada. And just before the break, we started into telling the story about something that she experienced in life, which profoundly changes anyone's life. If you go through any kind of major trauma, this obviously was something that is big. We had mentioned that she went out there in 2018. During the break, we were talking, turns out she actually moved out to Las Vegas April of 2017, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And
April 20.
Okay. And on October 2nd, 2017, you were at a country music festival. Was it a festival? It's like a festival, right?
Yep.
And it was later in the evening. At the time, and what I wrote down, because I did write some stats down so I wouldn't mess it up, there were approximately 22,000 in attendance. This was later in the evening, so it was deeper into the night, to the show. Jason Aldean was on the stage, and an individual up in the hotel knocks out a window and begins shooting down onto the crowd. Can you tell us about where you were? And what was that moment like? What was it like? Because I can only think about when something like that starts to happen, there has to be that time where you're trying to realize or figure out what is going on. What exactly is happening? Can you share that with us?
So my story is a little bit different than most people's. For one part, I don't like country music. I only went to this festival because I had a friend that was a photographer and he wanted to go take pictures at the festival. So we had workers passes. We went in for like an hour and a half. Like we were in and out. And we had just left and we were walking to Mandalay Bay. And in front of Mandalay Bay, there are these like Greek looking fountains in the front with, lots of water and whatnot. And we were just sitting out on the fountain, just chatting. And earlier in that night, I looked at Mandalay Bay and there was a strobe light in like the fourth floor window on the same face of the hotel that he was shooting out of. And I remember looking at the face of the hotel and being like, why is there a strobe light pointing out of that window? Like, I just had this like weird feeling. I was like, why? That doesn't feel right. And anyways, fast forward a couple hours, we're sitting in front of the hotel. We start hearing the sound of the shooting, but I personally have never heard an automatic weapon before. And so it sounded like fireworks. And so we're like looking around, we don't see any fireworks, but like it was pretty fast noises one after another. And so we're like, okay, something feels a little bit weird. And so we hop down. This is maybe 2 minutes into the shooting. Okay. This was like not a lot of time. We hop down off the wall and we take a left around the corner, walking like towards the strip. And as we take that corner to see the street, there's 3 cops running at us with rifles in their hands saying, run, there's an active shooter. And we're like, where do we run? We don't know where somebody's shooting. So we run towards the strip, and there was a bus station that had like a metal sheet. So we hid behind that because we didn't know where else to go. Lo and behold, he was shooting basically over our heads into the crowd that was on the other side of the street. And it went on for like probably 10-15 minutes that we were just huddled behind this bus stop. And thankfully we had just left the festival. So like we weren't in the chaos of people running around. But I could see the glass falling from the window that he was shooting out of. That's how close I was to where everything was happening. I could see the gold shimmer falling. I was like, why is there gold falling from the sky? And it was the glass from Mandalay Bay. Yeah. And, everything happens for a reason. We're hiding behind this bus stop. All of the traffic was stopped in a matter of probably 2-3 minutes of this starting. The city of Las Vegas did a really great job about shutting everything down and containing it the best that they could, in my opinion, from being somebody that was like there on the ground. And after like 5 or 10 minutes of this, everything shut down, one bus let through the traffic, stopped at the bus stop. People got off the bus and we're like, don't get off. There's a shooter. They laughed at us and got off the bus. And we got on the bus and got off the strip. And that was like kind of the end of that. But that kind of triggered like the start of a bunch of really traumatic events in my life that led me to getting to a point where like I had pretty severe mental health, like anxiety, depression issues going on that I had to work through. And a lot of that came from like fear of public places. I had like a crazy psycho stalker right after this that was threatening my life everywhere I went as well. And so I could not leave my home for quite some time. And so the thing that like helped me when I was at home, not wanting to leave my house, was all of these crafty things. It was keeping my hands and my mind busy with doing like very intricate, hyper-focused crafts. And I guess like, they say everything happens for a reason. If I hadn't have gone through those traumatic things and gotten into that state of mental health that I was in, I never would have found my craft and dedicated so much time to my craft to becoming as good at it as I am now. And so, like you said earlier, sometimes you can't appreciate the journey until you're at the end of the road. And I definitely in the moment, I don't appreciate that journey that I had to go through all of this trauma. But because of all of that, and because it put me in the mental state that I was, and I had to go through all of that healing, I became who I am today, and the best version of myself, the healthiest version of myself, the happiest version of myself. And yeah, as much as I hate to say it, like I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah. So I know when we talked about you coming on the show, one of your concerns was about traveling. And is that still part of that? Or is that just, you just don't like to travel?
I just like, don't love to travel in general. I'm definitely quite the homebody. But yeah, I don't know. It's not that like I travel like once or twice a year. You know what I mean? Like I can get myself to go places, but I'm not like, I don't have the travel bug. I'm not trying to like jet out every weekend trying to do things.
Well, I was curious because clearly going through something traumatic like that, which is something that a lot of people unfortunately have gone through at this point. And look, me being a firefighter paramedic in Memphis, one of the most dangerous cities in all of America, I have made tons of shootings. But something like that, obviously nothing close to it. And for something like that to go through as a spectator and to realize, if things had been different, maybe I would not have been as fortunate in that moment. Because I did write down a couple statistics just for people to know on this. You're right. You're spot on. The active shooting lasted for right around 10 minutes before police were able to get to the room. And then the shooter took his own life. There were 60 people killed, over 850 injured. So clearly the largest in modern day history of any of those types of events. And for a person going through that, to just pick up the pieces and move forward again, I could imagine the trepidation you would have just about going outside the door. And then on top of that, to have an active stalker. Just if you don't mind sharing, how does that come to an end? Where does that happen?
This is a wilder story than the shooting, honestly. If we get into the details,
because I think you mentioned that to me, and I'd just forgotten that piece of the story because you're stacking up stuff now.
Yeah, no, I think it relates back to like I was very much in a phase of life where I was so lost that I was just attracting chaos. And a month after the shooting happened, obviously I wasn't in a great mindset. I was spending a lot of time at home and stupid me, I never go to Walmart. I like despise Walmart. And I wanted to go buy fabric to sew some pillows because I just needed a craft for being at home. So I went to Walmart. I'm at the fabric counter cutting my fabric, and this guy walks up to me, and he was dressed very nicely. Had like a $250 pair of Converse on, not like your average Converse, like studded, like really like high-end Converse, leather jacket, nice jeans. You know, he looked decent.
Sure.
And chats me up, and he was like, "I'd love to take you out sometime." And so me being new to Vegas, I was like, you know, what would a couple drinks hurt? Sure. Like, I'll give you my number. We can go get drinks tonight. So I meet him for drinks, and immediately like something was off. Like his eyes, there was just something different about his eyes, and almost like he was on drugs or something. Like I just very like almost fidgety feeling. And I don't really drink that much. So he offered, he was like, "Do you want to smoke some weed?" And so we were in my car smoking. I didn't want to go to my place or his place. You know, I knew I wasn't going to see him again, but I was like, "Yeah, we can smoke before I go." And so we were smoking in my car, and we were talking about going to the gym. Such like a neutral topic, like who gets upset about going to the gym? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
And I mentioned that I had a trainer, and he's like, "Oh, what gym do you go to?" I mentioned the gym name. It's EOS. It's like a big chain gym here. And he was like, "Oh, I go to the same one." He was like, "Which location do you go to?" It was such easy conversation. And I was like, "Oh, the one in Durango." And he was like, "That's where I go." He's like, "I can't believe I've never seen you there before." And I was like, "Oh, yeah." He's like, "What's your trainer's name? I bet I know him." And I was like, "Oh, his name's, I don't know if I should use his name. We'll call him Kevin." He was like,
Okay.
"Oh." I was like, "Oh, his name's Kevin."
Mhm.
And he was like, "Oh, is he black?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah." And in that moment, like
It
switched into a new human being.
got
And
weird.
he started screaming at me in the car, telling me that I was disgusting, that I let this man take advantage of me, that I'm white trash, and I'm like this dirty, dirty human, which none of that had even happened. I hadn't even trained with the man yet. Like this was my first session tomorrow. And so he starts screaming at me. I ask him to get out of my car, and he spits on the floor of my car, and I drive away thinking that was the end of it. He had my phone number, but like blocked him, you know, went to bed that night thinking that move on.
Yeah.
That's the end of that. And I woke up in the morning to a string of hundreds of text messages from multiple numbers, FaceTimes, calls, all nonsense saying the same stuff, that I was going to get AIDS and die, that I was white trash, that I was disgusting. And at the end of the string of messages, he says, "I'm at the gym with a gun. I'm going to go shoot this guy."
Holy cow.
And yeah, so I'm like, this is 8 a.m. I'm full panic attack mode. My friend Alex comes over, and he drives me to the police station because I like couldn't drive. I was not in a position to like be able
Sure.
to get there myself. And as I'm filing a police report, they obviously send police officers over. They're like, "We don't see him. He's probably bluffing." While I'm at the police station, he says that he had a friend put a bomb in the locker room and he's going to blow the gym up. And so they have to shut the gym down, sweep it for a bomb. And I'm mortified. I knew every trainer at this gym. I go there every day. Like everybody knew that I was the person that like started all of this. I was just so mortified.
Yeah.
And I have like multiple trainers calling me, "What's going on?" Like, you know, we're getting death threats at the gym. He was calling the gym 12, 15 times every minute, every time he would hang up. And we couldn't block him because he was using an app on his phone that he could change his number to whatever he wanted. So like 911 9119 would call me, and then 119 1191 would call me. He could change it to whatever he wanted.
Didn't even know that was a
And
thing.
yeah, I didn't either. And so you know, I leave the police station, they sweep it for bomb, they don't find anything. And I had to work that night. I told him that I was working at MGM, and you know, I didn't think that telling him I was a waitress at a restaurant was going to harm me. And
Sure.
he was making death threats to me. He would call the restaurant saying, "I know you're working tonight, and I'm going to come shoot you in the restaurant tonight." Every day before work, I had to have security at MGM walk me to and from my car. Every security officer had his face plastered in every security room in MGM. You know, facial recognition was looking for him. Like they were doing everything that they could to make me feel safe, but ultimately I just couldn't continue working there. And so I had to quit my job, get a new phone number. I had to move houses. I changed my entire life because of this man. And they couldn't find him because there was an issue on the warrant for his arrest that he's a junior and they didn't put the junior on. So he had been arrested, or he had been pulled over 4 times in the time of like this happening to him actually getting arrested, where the warrant just didn't match that it was him, and they just kept letting him go. And about 6 months later, every like 2 weeks he would pop back into my life saying, "I'm gonna kill you." And after a couple of months, I stopped reacting to it because I could kind of tell he wasn't actually going to take action with it. But for a really long time, like you said, could not leave the house. I could not go to a concert. I could not go to anything. Like my friends would have to barricade around me and like blob move around me so that nobody could interact with me when we went out. And I never sought therapy for any of this. I never sought help in any way from a professional for any of these things. And so for the next like 2 years of my life, I was just like down this rabbit hole of like trauma and bad decisions and just like not knowing like who I wanted to be or where I should be, and just feeling really lost in life. And like, I didn't have like worth to myself. You know what I mean? Like I felt like people came in and all they were doing was hurting me, And when COVID happened and I could let all of that go finally and just exist in my own world and get help, I sought, a therapist out. I got, multiple spiritual leaders and people to like help elevate me out of that phase of life that I was in. And yeah, here we are today, thriving. But if I hadn't have been able to go through all that massive trauma, all of that healing, I never would have figured out who I am because I went back to my roots finally.
So two things on that. One, so from the start of the first time that he went down that road with you to the point where he did get arrested, I guess, is that what you said?
So there really isn't an ending to the story.
Still not an ending. Okay. So
he did get
been
arrested.
Over 2 years.
Yeah, he did get arrested, and I went to grand jury and I testified against him. And, the moral of the story with this one, with how you have to like look at the bright side for everything, because of what happened to me and the severity of what happened to me, it opened up an FBI investigation across the country, not just in Nevada. And because of the bomb threats being a federal crime, they were connected 10 other people, other women who he had done similar things to across California, New Jersey, New York. There were 5 different states that he had done this to different women. And all of them, when I showed up to testify, I thought it was just going to be me, the gym manager, and, this crazy dude. 10 other women were there to testify against him, 20 felony charges. And they gave him bail. He bailed himself out and he's never been found.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what year was that?
That was 2017. That was a month after the shooting.
So he bailed him.
I testified in 2018. I think it was February or March of 2018 is when I testified against him. So they had him, they arrested him, they got him, but
5 years later, he's still going. Yeah, I know.
And he's still out there.
Well, I ask about that because I was actually going to lead to that next part was, were you the only victim? Clearly that's not the case. There were others. Usually that is the case, that if a person's like that, they didn't just suddenly become that person that's been there for a while. So
they were all over race as well. All of the women had a story that involved a Black male that sparked the psycho aspect of it. So it was all race related, which is how they were able to connect all the stories.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask about the fact that, so this guy obviously had the history. He was violent. Now he's been on the run for 5 years. Who knows where he's at and stuff. Yeah. And for you, what does that do, or anything? Before I actually ask that question, let me say this, because I want to just make a comment here, is no blame to you. You did not ever blame yourself, did you?
I think that there was a little bit of blame in the sense that like my intuition told me no before I even got there. I didn't want to go on the date. I just didn't know anybody here yet. And I was like, what's the harm of going on one date, a couple drinks, get to know somebody? He told me he was this, kick-ass photographer in town, that he shot music videos for like Cascade and Fetty Wap and all of these people. And his story almost seemed to line up, and he made himself seem like this incredible person to get to know. And I just got fooled. And so I wouldn't say I blamed myself, but I've definitely learned to only listen to my intuition and to really respect my intuition, and that it's looking out for me for a reason. So I learned to listen to my body a lot more now than I did in the past.
I asked that question because your story, unfortunately, but is real, is not unique in the sense that happens to women all across the world. And what I would want people to hear from that part of the message is don't blame yourself, because hindsight is always 2020. And, it's hard to, you don't want to put up a wall to the point that you cannot communicate with other people, because that's not the norm. That's not the majority of humans. The majority of people, in my opinion, are good people, but there are those outliers that are sick. And, you do have to be careful. But the one thing that you can't do is, in a moment like that, blame yourself. I get what you're saying about the intuition. Our sixth sense is real. And you do, trust me, my gut has actually prevented me from doing some dumb stuff. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, I'm glad I dodged that one. And so you're right. There is that intuition you got to listen to. Now that you've been through that, and then after this point, we're going to jump all up in some jewelry with Miss Marika. Has that damaged your ability to have relationships, or is that too personal? Because that's another part of the story where people have had traumatic moments, domestic abuse, etc., moving to that next point in their life where they can find somebody that can be damaged. Has that been a problem?
For the following, 3, 4, 5 years, yeah, it totally was. It was a part of my personality, as part of who I was. When I got to know people, it was one of the first things I told them about myself. And I kind of started to realize that I am not my trauma, and I don't want to be this person, and I don't want it to hold me back anymore. And I did have to make the conscious decision to leave that behind and to not let it dictate who I am anymore, and that I can be whoever I want to be, regardless of the trauma that I've been through, because there are ways to heal and to get through those things. And you have to put the work in to heal from those. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a year. It's going to take years to get through that stuff. But once you do put the work in and you don't be the trauma anymore, and you start to live in the light, things start flowing again for you. And because I've been able to leave that in the past, it's not who I am anymore. I don't hold emotion to it anymore. It just is something that happened in the past now. And I'm almost grateful for it because of the place that I am in today.
That's so important. And that's why I wanted to ask you that question, is because I want people to know that you can forgive yourself. And I think that's one of the things a lot of people have trouble with. It's so much easier, in my personal opinion, to forgive someone else of something than it is to forgive yourself, especially if you feel like you could have prevented a moment. But I think that we're too harsh on ourselves at times, and you make mistakes and you don't even know it's a mistake at the moment. So maybe it's not a mistake. And then what you're able to do with that right now is the biggest picture of it all. And that is, take that moment that was traumatic and that was not fair, and you should never blame yourself. But now you've grown from that, and now you have tools in the toolbox that you would have never had, and you recognize that. So now we get to the funnest part. Then this is the part that when you shared this with me at the blocks, I was actually just in awe. Because it's so outside. We've already talked about the box, and now we're talking about the box at the blocks. And when you said this, I was so blown away, because I didn't even know it was a thing. You had your earrings in, and you do a dangle, and you go, these are real. I'm like, huh? They're real
flowers, yeah.
Real flowers. And so you explained to me that you have created this ability to take these flowers and you do a process to them. And I've seen your Instagram stuff, and you're wearing some heavy duty mask. So that's good. First of all, respiratory safety, firefighter. I know all about it. Respiratory safety. You're wearing a face mask, and you're making jewelry out of living things. Now, tell us a little bit about that, because when I said, do you have a patent? Are you going to trademark this? Whatever. You're like, I think I'm going to teach other people how to do this. Now, I have some pieces I put over here as my Coach Camp moment that I want to share at the end about that comment. But please tell my people about the process, what you do with jewelry, because it is amazing. And those earrings that you see on the screen right now they are real flowers that you have transformed into jewelry. So share that.
Yeah. So kind of like how we had talked about, art was the thing that got me through the hardest times of my life. And because I've kind of pioneered this art form, not many people know how to do it, or conceptualize how I do it, to be able to do it without guidance. And I think just as much as I get people saying that they love my jewelry, I get the same amount of people asking me, how do you do that? And everybody has a different journey in life. And I don't think that every artist has to share their secrets about how they make their art. But for me personally, and why I'm so connected to my business, is because it is the thing that healed me. And if I can provide somebody with the tools to heal themselves by falling in love with a new form of art, that to me means more to me than them buying a pair of jewelry or a pair of earrings from me. to be able to influence somebody's mental health like that through something that they fall in love with, that's what life is about. And that's kind of what running a business is kind of taught me, is that when you start to fall in love with everything that's in your life, love comes into your life more. You know, the chaos leaves, the love comes in, and it starts to feel a lot more calm and like it's just flowing instead of like tidal waves or tsunamis hitting you, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's just part of my journey and why I run my business the way that I do, that I want to share my art with the world because it has healed me.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, that's the beauty of this too, is the fact that what brought you to where you are now and what you're doing. Obviously, you had this natural ability to have artistic talent and stuff. That was always a part of who you were, but you've not just crafted that in a unique way, but you used all those traumatic experiences throughout your life to not just understand and appreciate what it is you're doing, but know how much that meant to you to be able to share that with other people. I think we spoke about this a little bit on the show. I know I did with some people. I'm not sure if I mentioned it with you, but one of the things I have the most trouble with is getting compensation for what I bring to the table as far as like motivational speaking, doing my events, because I know how much it means to other people. I want to give them something bigger than life. I want to share a part of me that can make you better, whatever that is. And I want to give that away. And it's hard sometimes to recognize, you know, it's okay to get compensation for what you do, because what you're doing is actually becoming your lifestyle. That is what you need to have sustainability. But you never lose that piece of you that understands why it's so important or significant to share with other people. And that's what you're doing. And I know that you had that trouble because we talked a little bit about that. And you're like, you know, I could patent this and I could sell this exclusively, and we could go to like Marshalls all across the country. And I'm like, yeah, let me help you get the Marshalls. I got some Marshalls down in Mississippi. Let's go, girl. And you're like, no, they're already my sponsor. It's good. And I'm just like, yeah, I get it. And I think that was the story that I took away the most out of the blocks, was so many people were there in their own individual journeys, not to find out how necessarily they could get rich or famous, but how they could infuse what they had a passion for into the world and make a difference. And I think that was the bulk of people. You were one of the ones that stuck with me, which is why I'm so glad you decided to come on here. And I have a theory about why it was flowers.
Okay. I'd love to hear it.
My Coach Camp theory is that through the toughest times that we go through, and I have experienced this myself, you could go through some really, and I want to use an analogy, some tough trails. And sometimes on the most harsh trails, and you living in Las Vegas can speak to this better than even me, you may find weeds, potholes, thorns, thickets, but all it takes is one beautiful flower in the middle of all that chaos. And for a moment, you recognize the beauty. I think that we go through trauma at times, but we need to find that flower. And I think that's why flowers were drawn to you. I think that is the beauty in the trauma. And now you're able to give that to other people. That's my take on it.
I love that. It's funny that you say that, because one of my favorite sayings, and I have a sign of it in my house. It's one of like the things that inspired me, I guess, to start my business. It's, may all your weeds be wildflowers. And you can always look at a weed and say that's a weed and pull it out of the ground, or you can look at it and say that's a wildflower. It's beautiful. It's bringing light to the world, and it's all how you interpret the situation, right? And what you bring from it. And I think anything can be interpreted in a positive light if you want it to be.
That was the tie-in that I was seeing. And I didn't know that part about you. I didn't know that you had that quote up at your house. So how unique is that? I'm not giving myself any accolades. All I'm doing is just feeding. I'm feeding on the energy, y'all. This is not Chris. This is not Coach Camp. This is my people. This is what it's all about, is bringing on my guests and just really connecting for a moment, because I know that message is going to speak to so many people out there. So share with my listeners as we get close to the end here, share with them what is next, because tell me about your handles, your Instagram, the name of your company, how people could reach out to you if they want to get your jewelry. Give me all those specifics.
Yeah, so jewelry business is Blossom and Love. You can find it on Instagram at blossom.and.love. I also am a business coach. So if you're looking to start your own business, you need a little bit of help feeling inspired in what direction to take it or how to scale it, how to brand it. I have a coaching business called Blossom into Love. It's kind of the journey of falling in love with yourself through the process of building your business. So I would love to help you start your journey with your business if you're interested. And the newest venture with my business, with bringing more art to the world, I'm actually creating DIY kits, which you know about because I started with this idea at the blocks. It's coming to life currently. I would hope to have it released in the next, I'm going to say 2 months is, my goal to having it started and released. But I want to bring my designs to the world with the tutorials of how to make my art, all in one kit for you. So it's kind of my way of sharing my art, but also, yeah, learning how to scale a business because that's what it's all about, running your life and making an impact as big as you can.
I think that's a big part of your story. And I'm just going to throw this out. There's a nugget. It's a free advice nugget. You can throw it away if you want to. It's fine. My daughter throws every nugget away I give to her. So it's fine. I'm very used to that happening. You should include a little snippet of your story and why you ended up where you are when you sell your kits. I think people will have a personal connection with you. I really do.
That's what marketing is. You know what I mean? That's building a community. That's what you do. That's what social media is all about. Sharing your story and connecting with people through real life actions and scenarios that, if you've been through it, there's a million people out there that have probably also been through it and are going to connect with you. And I think sometimes we forget how big the world is. I think there's room for everybody out here. There's room for every artist to eat at the table. There's room for every single person, regardless if you're an artist or not, to eat at the table. And if you go in with that energy and that mindset that there is room for you, there always will be, and you'll always be able to eat.
I love that. Marika, as we wrap up, I always like to ask this, and I did not pre-warn you. So if you need a second to think about it, I can play some.
Oh no, on the spot. I'm terrible at these.
It's okay. It's all right. What would you leave my listeners with? What kind of message would you leave them with as we wrap up today?
Yeah, I think that follow peace is probably the thing I'd like to leave you with. If you're feeling like you're a little lost and you're not sure what you're doing with your life, you don't know where to go, follow the peace, follow the things that bring you the most excitement and joy and serenity. And that is your path. The only thing that you need to trust is your own body and what it feels like to do things. And if it feels good to do something, continue doing that because that's your body showing you that it's the right thing for you.
Follow your passion and you will find your purpose. Just so my listeners know, the episode you guys just watched this past Monday before you're seeing hers right now, and we're talking in not literal terms because the timelines are a little off. That was what my final message was of the guest that came on just the Monday before yours was look for peace, not happiness, because peace is lasting. And that was his message. I can't make this stuff up, y'all. I didn't do this. They didn't even know each other. That is beautiful, Miss Marika. Thank you so much. Look, if I find myself in Las Vegas, which is very possible, I like to run races. I've ran Las Vegas. Yeah. I might come back out there and do another half, go down Fremont or something. I'm definitely going to look you up.
Rock and roll marathon? I think that happens here, right?
Yeah, well, I did the marathon, the rock and rolling, but I might come out for a half. Besides, I like Las Vegas. This is a lot of fun. Yeah, so it's a blast. We'll look you up. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Hey, you're welcome back on the show sometime whenever you're big and doing all your jewelry stuff. Come back in and tell everybody about, hey, now this is what you can do too, because this is where we started. Now this is where we've been, and it's a beautiful thing. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I am so grateful to be here today. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
Great. Absolutely did great. To all my listeners out there, I want you guys, please continue to tune in. Go to my social media stuff. You can find everything on my website, motivatewithcoachcamp.com. Go and subscribe to my YouTube. I need some more YouTube subscribers. And until next time, Coach Camp out.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up, it's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up so I can make a better me. Better believe in your mind, cause it's everything. You can mold, shape,